On today's Fight Report, Sunday, August 17, 2025, Hanson, Crafton, and I talk about the heavyweight fight division and a couple of big fights over the weekend and a possible new star in the division. Plus, we recap UFC 319 and perhaps another star is born. Actually, a star becomes a bigger star from that one.
You are listening to The Fight Report with Hanson Crafton. And here's your host, Greg Mingelt.
And thank you so much to Susie for that nice new introduction. This is the last podcast, Hanson, of season 1 of the Central Indiana Sports Report. Season 2 begins Monday morning, but we're using the new intro on this podcast as kind of a primer. And welcome, fight fans, to the Central Indiana Sports Report and Hanson Crafton's Fight Report. And we're going to talk UFC 319. Of course, it was a big day in UFC 319 and some matches that really matter. But as you know, Hanson, heavyweight boxing is one of my favorite sports. I love it. It's been really hard to follow the last few years. I thought we had something in Anthony Joshua. It was pretend. I thought we had in a few guys. No one's really captured the imagination, but we might have one. And his name is Moses Itauma, and he's impressive, Hanson.
Oh, man, he was super impressive. Like I said, going into it, the biggest thing I see with him is his hand speed. It's something you haven't seen with most heavyweights, especially he's particularly a big guy. But his speed is just, he caught Dillian White yesterday with a left hand. He didn't really show he was hurt too bad. He kind of took a couple steps back, and I think Moses just knew that he had got him, so he kind of knew he was hurt, and he kind of flooded him. And once he did, he just didn't let him off the hook at all.
He was very patient. He's very well trained. He is you can tell he's smart, a smart fighter. But the thing that stood out to me, Hanson, was it seemed like even before the bell, but especially once Itauma hit White, he wanted nothing to do with him.
Nothing. And you hardly ever see that with a Dillian White. Like I was telling my buddy after that fight, he got hit one time, and then it's kind of like he was out. It was like he was just he was backing up. His legs were already kind of shaky. It was just a matter of time. It
was like, I've never been hit like this.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, it was a good left hand on top of the head, probably caught that temple a little bit. And he had no answer. Like, I don't even think he landed a shot on Itauma. I think he just blew right through him.
And as we said in the preview, if you beat Dillian White, you're a pretty good fighter.
Yeah. He's only got losses to world champions. So, that's where he's headed. Even, after the fight, when the announcer asked him, he was like, do you see yourself as a champion within the next 2 years? And he was like, of course. So that's his goal, at least.
Well, let me say this, Hanson. My advice to him, and he will not take any from me, but my advice to him would be take your time. You don't want to get into a ring with guys who really know what they're doing when you're 20 years old, no matter how good you are, because there is nothing that beats experience in boxing. And if he starts going for the belts too soon, he's going to get himself beat 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. He's in no rush at all. And I think he even kind of seemed like that, like when they asked him, he was even like, hey, I think Parker's and Chimaev kind of earned their shots. It's like he didn't really mind to set aside and let Parker fight for the belt first. I think he really wants to kind of slow play into it. But when he's ready, I think he will be ready to be a world champion. I see him being a world champion.
And it wasn't the only heavyweight fight that night. Filip Hrgović and David Adele had a really nice match. I don't think it's going to matter. I don't think either one of those guys are near the level of the champions. That being said, that was a fun fight among two guys who were pretty good, and Adele really showed a lot of heart.
Yes, he did. I think it was the 8th round. It might be one of the rounds of the year. Adele got knocked down. Looked like he was hurt.
I thought he was done.
Yeah, Felipe went in for the kill, and the next thing you know, he just got hit with a barrage of punches. Daly just wouldn't go away. He
It's
stayed in there. He
crazy.
started trading. He landed a couple big shots. Had Felipe kind of going to lock up with him a little bit, try to get his feet back under him, and it just ended up being a really good round. It was a really good fight. I think a lot of people expected Felipe to go in there and take him out, but like you said, he was super tough and super game. He was in there for the whole fight, and anytime it seemed like he got hurt, he responded well, and he threw punches to keep Felipe off of him. He was unable to find a shot to take him out.
It was crazy fight, crazy good fight. I just don't think Hrgovic has the defensive abilities to fight with the top fighters in the world. He is a wide open. He's a powerful dude, I'll say that, but he is just a wide open target.
Yeah, I agree. He's already got one loss on his record, and it's kind of for that reason. He's definitely there to be hit. And when you're fighting heavyweight boxers, that's the last thing you want to do is be there to be hit, because a couple of those guys hit you, they could put your lights out.
That's right. Also, big night for Nick Ball.
Yeah, a good fight for Nick Ball. It wasn't, I think a lot of people underestimated Sam Goodman. Sam Goodman fought a really good fight. Yeah, he used his length. He stayed behind his jab. Honestly, I think the fight was a lot closer than the judges scored. One judge had it particularly correct in my thought. He had it 115, 113, which is what I think it was closer to. They had it 118, 110, 117, 111. I didn't see it like that. I saw Nick Ball actually needing the championship rounds to escape that fight, and he did. He seemed to be the better in shape fighter. When it got to the late rounds, Nick Ball was still able to put combinations together. Sam Goodman was in there. When he would throw one, Nick Ball would kind of respond with two or three. So he seemed to be the better in shape fighter. I think he's probably had a little more 12-round fights than Sam Goodman. But Sam Goodman was just as good as I thought he was going into it. He was a really good fighter. His length in that division gives guys problems. Nick Ball had trouble early on getting inside because, like I said, Sam Goodman kept fighting behind that jab. And it just seemed like he would stop any progress Nick Ball would make. But Nick Ball ended up getting the victory. I thought Nick Ball looked good, and I think he put himself in line for some big fights.
And Hanson, you were 7-0 on your predictions on the preview show, and there were a lot of fights between boxing and the UFC that were pretty close odds. But one thing you did get wrong was Abraham Nova was able to go the distance with Ford, but Ford was clearly the better fighter.
Yeah, that's what I didn't really know. Like I said, Ford sometimes does take guys out that he should take out. But Nova was a lot tougher than I expected. I did take Raymond Ford win that fight. It was a fight for him to win. And Ford looked good. He dominated the early rounds. I think he probably lost a couple in the middle. But outside of that, that was his fight to win pretty much from start to finish. I think Nova was just a lot tougher than I expected. And, Ford, he's right back in the hunt. I don't know where he'll go from here. There's a lot of fights he could have, especially at that stacked featherweight division now. So he's definitely got his name back in the hat, to be number 4 ranked and to come away with a good win like that. Maybe he fights a Sam Goodman next. I don't know. But like I said, he's got a lot of options after that fight. It's a pretty exciting division in the featherweight class.
And it wasn't the greatest UFC card of all time, but it was a pretty good one. And the thing that came out of it was a superstar, right?
Yeah, it was one of those cards, like I said, going into it. You only had the one title fight, but you had a lot of names that your hardcore fans really enjoy. Anytime you have a card with Carlos Paredes on there, MVP, you had the Aaron Pico and his debut fight. LaRon Murphy's been on a roll lately. So those were names that just are exciting names. And I feel like those fights lived up to it. The 2 knockouts, the Paredes spinning back elbow, the LaRon Murphy back elbow, those are just, you rarely see the spinning elbow knockouts like that to have 2 on one card. It's kind of unheard of, and it was just kind of a really fun card. MVP had a great performance on there. He does what he does. He's a great showman while he's in there. He's kind of like an old school boxer when he fights in MMA. He's such a great showman as he's in there. And it was just one of those cards that ended up being really good. The main event probably wasn't as good as people would have liked to see. I don't think anybody expected that.
Let's talk about Chimaev because you're right. It wasn't as good as people thought it was going to be because Duplessis is one of the best fighters in the world, and he just completely dominated it, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean his grappling was so much better than Duplessis. I don't think anybody expected it to be that much better. Now I know going into it that was going to be Chimaev's. That's how he's going to win. He's a really good grappler. He's like I said in the pre-show, his stat, he's taken everybody he's fought down within a minute of the fight. Really good wrestler, really good control once he gets on the ground. But I think people expected Dricus to have a little more pushback, maybe to be able to get up a little bit off his back, maybe be able to fight back a little bit. I don't think anybody expected him to get dominated the way he did. I mean, to get put in 3 crucifixes throughout a fight, just the ground control that Chimaev had on him the whole fight was really surprising. But when you have a fight like that, it's not going to make for a super entertaining fight, especially when you got one guy. It seemed like Dricus just didn't want to do what he needed to do to try to get up to put himself in dangerous spots. Seems like he was kind of waiting it out to see if maybe he could get Chimaev tired and then go to work. But Chimaev looked great. He was dominant from start to finish, and his wrestling and grappling really controlled that fight.
We'll continue recapping UFC 319, Hanson, but what do you think this card leads to ultimately? Or what do you expect to see this card produce in the future?
Well, Chimaev, he's been a guy who's notorious for when he's healthy, he'll fight multiple times. We've seen him fight a couple times in just 2 weeks. So he's looking for a quick turnaround. I think he wants to be on the Abu Dhabi card that's later in October. He'll probably get that. Dana loves putting those guys on those cards. So I think he'll get on there. Who his dance partner will be is kind of still up in the air. You've got a handful of names that he could fight. So I don't really know who. I don't think Dricus will get an immediate title shot. I don't think he'll get that opportunity. He'll have to win another fight or two before he gets a shot at redemption. Maybe you could see a Paulo Costa. Maybe you could see a Sean Strickland in there. It doesn't really know. It just depends on how the middleweight division kind of goes out. There's not really many fights lined up. So it'll be interesting. He'll probably get somebody coming off of, maybe Hernandez from last week. Maybe he gets a shot in there. So I don't know who he'll fight, but I think I'd look for Chimaev to have a pretty quick turnaround. I think he'll fight sometime soon to defend his belt. LaRon Murphy did exactly like I said he was going to do. He had an opportunity to really put his name in there, and he did. And I think that's going to lead for him to get a title shot with Volkanovski. So I think he'll get a title shot from that. He's earned it. He took out a guy who had a lot of hype behind him at Pico. He was coming in as an underdog on short notice. And like I said, if he goes in there and has a great win, a great finish like he did, he was probably going to earn a title shot. And it sounded like last night after the fight, Dana pretty much confirmed that he is going to get that title shot. Even Volkanovski tweeted something out last night, said, "See you in December." So nice. I think LaRon Murphy has earned that title shot. So he'll get a title shot from that. Then MVP, he's one of those guys that he can fight. He fights in 2 weight classes. He likes to go to middleweight and welterweight. And he's one of those, he just likes exciting fights. Now, he'll never turn down a title shot, but he's a guy that can fight anybody. I know he said something about he would love to fight Carlos Paredes in Brazil. After Paredes win last night, he asked for a fight in Brazil. And MVP said he would more than likely be down for that. He would have to go back down to welterweight for that fight. But he would love that. I know they kind of mentioned something about him versus Adesanya at middleweight. So with MVP, he always leaves himself many options because he's willing to fight in 2 weight classes. And he's kind of willing to fight anybody. MVP don't really turn down any type of fights. I know he doesn't prefer to fight wrestlers just for his style. He likes entertaining fights. But he'll fight anybody. So there's a couple options for him. But I think the biggest winner last night was LaRon Murphy.
Let's talk a little more about Page and Cannonier. That was quite a fight, wasn't it?
Yeah, Page is, like I said, he's a showman in there. He knocked him down a couple of times, does his dance while he's in there, but he's just so hard to fight. He's one of those, and Joe Rogan talked about it on the broadcast last night. He's one of the last real karate-style fighters that you have in MMA where he point fights. He leaps in, leaps out. His stance, he's wide open, he's springy, his hands are down, and he's just so fast. He's such a hard fight for anybody. When Ian Gary was able to beat him, basically how he beat him was you just got to stall him off against the cage. You got to try to lean on him. Just don't let him get any distance because when he has distance, he can create so much offense. When he fought Kevin Holland, he was hitting him with spinning back elbows. It's all his fights. He does that leap in right hand. He caught Cannonier with it twice last night, was able to drop him both times. He's just such a fun fight. It's such an interesting style that he brings. It's hard to really train for, and it's hard to fight when you're in there because he's moving so much. You want to just take his head off, but you just swing, and he's not there when you swing. It was multiple times with Cannonier last night. He would just take big swings, and he just wasn't there. MVP's footwork is really good. Even when you back him against the cage, he gets sidestep. He can get out either way. His head movement's really good. I think in the last round, he kind of left himself open a little bit. He got a little excited, was trying to go for the knockout. Cannonier was able to take him down, but you saw that he's very good off his back. He was able to keep Cannonier in, didn't let him get any bombs off. I think Cannonier even mounted him for a little bit, and MVP was able to fight back to the guard, didn't take any damage. So he had a really good performance. It was a really good fight for him, a really fun fight too. He's one of those guys, just his style. It's very entertaining the whole time you're watching it. So it was a really good performance for him. And like I said, I think he's opened up a lot of options for him moving forward.
Hanson, you and I are going to talk fighting again on Friday. Not a huge weekend of fighting coming up. We'll mostly be talking about the weekend after, but we will preview this weekend a little bit and talk about what's going on in the fighting world altogether. Thank you so much, Hanson, and we'll talk again later this week.
No problem.
That's right, Susie. We are now talking with Hanson twice a week, on most weeks, not every week. There's some weekends there's not enough fighting worth talking about, but most of the time we will now have 2 podcasts a week with Hanson. Thanks so much to him for joining me and for agreeing to do it a couple of times a week. I know he loves doing it. And thank you for listening. Please share this podcast with a fight fan in your life and help spread the word that the Central Indiana Sports Report is here talking about sports every single day. Central Indiana Sports Report is a product of ITG Media, and I love you, Susie.